2,600 years ago, when Buddha Sakyamuni attained nirvana, enlightenment under the Bodhi tree, and since then he had been teaching and lecturing for 49 years, and have about more than 380 gatherings. And in each gathering, in each congregations, in each lecture, there are always people asking questions. Who are these people? These are great bodhisattvas. These are great saints. They already knew the answer because most of them were enlightened. They already knew the answer. Why did they ask questions? They ask questions for those who are ignorant. Because they have the mind to let everybody enlighten. So when they ask questions, they don't ask for themselves. They ask for all the other beings who are waiting for the answers, who do not know how to ask questions. These are the bodhisattvas who are extremely compassionate. Every thought they have, they are thinking about enlighten others. Every thought they have, they're thinking about how to benefit others. Can we react in that way? I enjoy your talk today. Thank you. My question relate consciousness, vijnana, and rebirth to Amitabha Buddha. Does consciousness play a role in rebirth, and what is reborn? If consciousness is carryover between two births, how is consciousness taught in Pure Land without rest of human learning ability by Amitabha Buddha, or in Sukhavati Sutra? So the person who is writing this, you must have read quite a few sutras. Not many people know Sukhavati Vyuha. Why did Sakyamuni Buddha, before his enlightenment, not follow the path he taught in Sukhavati Sutra? You know what the question is? Some people may not know what the question is asking. So actually, let's summarize it. Does consciousness play a role in rebirth, and what is reborn? Everybody have a consciousness, right? And the Buddhas, according to the Vijnana Vachata, Vijnana, we have 8 consciousnesses. We have the eyes consciousness, the ear consciousness, the nose consciousness, the tongue consciousness, the taste consciousness, the body consciousness. That's the 5, right? The first 5. And then we have the 6th consciousness. What is that 6th consciousness? The mano consciousness. And this mano consciousness is actually the cognitive process of mentality. You know what cognition? The cognition part of your consciousness is the brain. The brain is in 3 parts. The limbic system, the cerebral cortex, and the spinal cord. And the brain basically is in the rational learning part, which is the cerebral cortex, and the emotional part, which is the limbic system. So all these, the 6th consciousness is actually your rationalization, your intellectualization. How do you make decisions? How do you make creativity? How do you remember? How do you learn a language? That's all from the cognitive process. And how do you rationalize things? And how do you dig up from the past files and remember, memory, imagination, delusions, everything? That's the cognitive part of it. That's the 6th consciousness. So in other words, your forerunner 5 consciousnesses are just the salesman and the sales lady. They're just responsible for interaction with outside, and that mano consciousness is the manager, they control everything. They interact everything, they analyze everything. They digs up the old files, they make predictions and make forecasts and get onto the old files to get information for memory retention. That's the 6th consciousness. That's a very powerful consciousness, you know. If you don't have the 6th consciousness, the cognitive part of it, you're simply like a body without brain. So the 6th consciousness is very important. That's your learning consciousness too. And then there's also a 7 consciousness, you know. So when I answer your questions, I got to go into the detail. Otherwise, I don't know. You don't know what I mean. So the 6 consciousness, you know, the cognitive process of it. The 7 consciousness. What is the 7 consciousness? It is, in the Sanskrit language, it's called the manas consciousness. Not the mano. You know how I try to remember that? That mano is a man, that it is the manager, and that manas is the director. What is this manas? 7 consciousness. This 7 consciousness, the 7th one, that is the ego consciousness. That's the self-consciousness. You were born with a very strong ego. This is mine, this is I. You have an ego in you. That ego is a very hardened self in you. Everything you think about, you always think about I, my interest. That's 7 consciousness. It's the ego consciousness. And you were born with that kind of ego consciousness from your rebirth. All right, that's the 8 consciousness. And just to stop in here, if we don't have the 7 consciousness, what happened? If you don't have the 7 consciousness, you just have the 6, that means you only have the cognitive consciousness, which is rationalization. Then you don't have an ego. You just rationalize and intellectualize, but then it's not true. You still have an ego consciousness that affects the mano consciousness. So everything you think about, you're egoistic. Everything you think about is how to protect yourself. Everything you think about is how to better yourself. So you have self-conceived, self-love, self-degradation, depression, anxiety, and all that happen to you. That's the 7 consciousness, the emotional consciousness. You always have the emotions because of the egoistic motions in you. That's the 7 consciousness. And then there's also the 8th. We call it the final consciousness. What is that consciousness? That is the bank. Everything that you have done is all bank in there. Everything you have done in your previous life, all bank in there. And that store consciousness, we call it alaya consciousness, is the one that's responsible for what? Rebirth. So when you died, all the other consciousness go. No more eyes, no more ears, no more taste, no more tongue. All your salesmen are gone when the company went bankrupt. When the company went bankrupt, all the salesmen and sales ladies were gone. The manager is gone too. He hasn't got a salary. And how about the 7 consciousness? The directors. The directors all shrink into this store consciousness and become one. The ego shrink into the bank consciousness. And this bank consciousness, when you die, is the last consciousness to leave your body. You can't see it. It's energy. How can you see energy? That banking consciousness is like an immeasurable computer memory that can remember millions of years. That is very powerful. How many chips in there? Billions megabytes. Billion megabytes. Everything gets stored in there. What thought you have? Every thought you have, every action, every speech is all stored into that huge big memory. You can't get away with bad things that you have done. And of course, all the good things you have done, you have all the good causes and all the good effects. So every thought counts because every thought enters into that consciousness. And some of these thoughts that carry into actions and speech, some of them were still latent. We call it the bija, B-I-J-A in Sanskrit language, the bija, the seeds, the karmic seeds. Everything that you thought, everything that you spoke about, everything you acted, all stored as bija, as seeds, as if the apple seeds, the apricot trees, seeds all stored into the soil. And that reincarnate. So how is consciousness? What is related to reborn? That's the consciousness that leaves your body the last. Where would that consciousness go? Depends on your karmic energy. What did you do when you were alive? What kind of karma you have? If you have a karma that is so bad that leads you down to inferno, that's where you go. If you have a karma that's so good that leads you to good places, that leads you to the human realms, which will make you become a billionaire, healthy and good, you will go there. But you still find one day you have to die. The Buddha has transcended all these into a place that there's no rebirth. This 8 consciousness, which is a polluted consciousness, has already been transformed into one purity, into the Amala Vijnana. You know what Amala is? There's a ninth consciousness, which is the Amala consciousness. That is one purity. No more life and death, no more rebirth. That's what the Buddha have, for the sake of calling it a consciousness. Actually, when you become a Buddha, there's no such thing as consciousness. What do you need the consciousness for? For the sake of calling it, for the sake of understanding it, you're going to have words to think about it, right? Words will bring you thought. Thought will bring you action and speech. And then action and speech repeated all the time become your personality. Your personality becomes your destiny. So you need words. Amala consciousness. Finally, how is it related to Sukhavati Vyuha? Sukhavati Sutra. What is Sukhavati, you know? Anybody who, except for the one who wrote out this question, anybody who does not know what Sukhavati is, raise your hands. So everybody knows. Tell me, what does it mean? Sukhavati is the land of happiness. Sukhavati is a place Sukhavati is when you were born. You don't reborn into the six realms of reincarnation. You will go to the land of bliss where Amitabha is. The land of bliss where Amitabha is. Why is there a land of bliss? Because there was a Buddha, Amitabha Buddha, who was very creative. Before he became the Buddha, he made a vow. Because he knew that as time goes on, sentient beings will have a lot of sufferings that they may not be able to become enlightened in one's lifetime. Given the busyness of life, the vicissitude of life that you experience now, what kind of time do you have for practice meditation? You may not have enough time to practice meditation. You only have enough time to eat your breakfast, your lunch, you go to work, you have time to get busy with your own life. You don't have any time to do practice. Given that situation, the Buddha, Amitabha Buddha already knew about that. And he thought, as time goes on, there's more insecurity, more uncertainty, more and more sentient beings may not be able to get enlightened in one's lifetime. So maybe I should create a world of land of happiness where they do not have to take rebirth. They're not yet Buddha yet, but they just immigrate into there as a transitory place so that they can learn in there to be the Buddha. And I'll be the professor there teaching. With all these saints will be teaching in that world. Sukhavati Vyuha will be teaching in that world until they all become the Buddha. So that's just a transient place. Given that most of the people are immigrants in here originally, they create a world which is not called Canada. They create a world which is called the land of bliss so that you can immigrate in there, so that you can learn in there. It's just like you have immigrated into Canada. A transient world where your soul, given quote unquote, will be in there. Not heaven. There's not heaven. But you only learn in there to become the Buddha. Heaven is not the ultimate place to go, When you go to heaven, you enjoy happiness. But when it matures that you have to go back down to reincarnation and rebirth, you go down. Heaven should not be the ultimate place to go because you are still subject to rebirth after enjoying happiness in heaven. The Buddha said, transcend heaven. Go beyond heaven. Okay, so were you asking me why it's Amitabha created this transitory world where you stay in there? And of course, there are conditions for the immigration policy. There's conditions. You got to satisfy all the qualifications. Like I said, you go to employment office or immigration office to seek a status of immigrant. You got to speak English. You got to have certain criteria that you have to meet the immigration status. You have to tie your consciousness with that of Amitabha Sutra by chanting his name, by mentally linking to it. You have to put up a link. He has a website link in there. Do you have the passcode? Do you have the frequency? You don't believe it? 100 years ago, do you believe that if you link, you can link to any parts of the world? 100 years ago, do you believe that human sound waves can travel thousands of miles? You don't believe that 100 years ago. Given the same scenario, you don't believe that if you have Amitabha's website, email address, or whatever you call it, frequency, you can actually transmit your own soul into there. That may come true. Nothing is impossible. If you don't have that link, what would you do? Given that you are Mr. So-and-so this life, you suffer or whatever, you feel happy temporarily, and then you died, and what do? You're reborn into the next life. You could be someone in a poor country. You could be someone you're suffering. And then you do all this suffering all the time. This life you may be lucky. You're born in a rich family. And then after being born in a rich family, you're a rich kid, then you got spoiled, you enjoy all the luxuries, you did all the bad deeds, and next life you're going to roll into another worse realm of life. You suffer that way. And now Amitabha set up that land, and he wanted to go there with certain criteria, and it's written in Sukhavati Sutra that if you read it, you know what are the requirements for immigration going into that land. There are requirements, basic requirements. Lastly, it says that why didn't Sakyamuni Buddha seek his final nirvana in that land? Sakyamuni Buddha served his last sentence in this life, in the last life. You see, before a Bodhisattva become the Buddha, he has to come into this world one lifetime before transcending rebirth. And that's the place where he should come to. It's by causality. It's by cause and effect. And he wanted to show himself as a prince, and then taking all these forms of life. It's because he wanted to express to sentient beings that he is just an ordinary person. An ordinary person like himself can be the Buddha. And then he also introduced Amitabha's way, which if you're not successful in this life, you can seek that way, which is an expedient way, a skillful way. All right, I think I simplified enough for this question. And if you have any further questions on that, then you can ask later. How long have I spent my time to answer these questions? Huh?
20 minutes.
20 minutes. Oh, time flies. So how can I do all this? Sometimes when I'm back there, I said, today I'm going to talk about 5 slides, and then end up with 1 slide. Talk too much. Next question. Venerable Hong Chi. I'm not Venerable Hong Chi. And Venerable Hong Chi is right there. Please, could you advise how parents, what could be the best way for parents to guide teenage children to learn and practice Buddhist morality, given the fact that the children now are so much engaged in social media and not able to appreciate the Buddhism? That's really a problem. There's so much mass media now. They want to play games. Everybody, if you observe very carefully, in Hong Kong especially, in a subway station where everybody was sitting in a train, you know what they did? Everybody was doing this. Everybody had their head this way. I'm sure they're going to have a spinal cord problem as time goes on. The neck will be in pain. Imagine all the time you're putting your head down and you're twisting your spinal cord. There must be a problem. We didn't have that when we were a teenager. In the very, very early age, we didn't even have a phone. You know how did we communicate? In the 1950s, you know how we communicate? I still remember when I was in 1950, I want to call my friends to go for a bicycle ride or to play in the beach. You know what I did? There's no phone, right? We just stand. So in Hong Kong, there were 5 stories and 6 stories at that time. There were no skyscrapers like 100 floors, no. About 7 stories and 8 stories. You know how we communicate? We just yell. Hey, come down. We just yell up. And they all listen and they come down. We used to be yelling. That's the reason why we could sing relatively well. Because we're yelling all the time. We're practicing the vocal cord all the time. Why am I talking about this? Anyway, to guide teenage children to learn and practice Buddhist morality, I think you can't force them. And you have to guide them. You can't force them. Why don't you ask them to come here for lunch? But they may not like, they like meat. I don't think they will like vegetarian. So you give them, think of a way that you can have your teenager come here and listen to some talks, or I don't know, I never thought about that. There must be some ways to guide teenagers to learn Buddhist teaching. Let's start with some education first. We're planning to do some courses. We're planning to set up some academy where they can come on a weekend basis. We plan to do some summer camps. Well, we really want to do some summer camps for teenagers. We have a farm in there. We do a summer camp where we have a Mongolian yoke. Then they can stay in there, and we have all kinds of recreational facilities that they can enjoy. Maybe that's the way to go. We may even have a kindergarten, set up or something like that. I don't know. I haven't thought about this problem. I haven't thought about how to do it. But it should start at home. Teach them morality. In order to change your teenagers, the most important is to change yourself first. If you're morally sound, if you have a high moral standard within the families, then there's a lot of harmony in the families. If there's a lot of harmony in families, you can change your children. If you're always intoxicated, how can you teach your kids to stay away from drugs? I mean, you got to change yourself first. By changing yourself, you may be able to change others. So that's very important. So change yourself. Harmonize that with your children. And also, when I'm back there this morning talking about depression, if you have any family members who suffer from depression, worry, anxiety, phobia, fear, anger, hatred, jealousy, lust consciousness, or whatever, lust conscious, whatever. If you have family members like that who have such emotional problem, don't just bring them theories. Don't just bring them whole sets of philosophies that you dig up from Google about how to deal with depressed people. They know all those. What they need is your support. What they need is you need to stay with them, listen to them, and care for them. Don't just yell at them. Don't just laugh at them. Don't just despise them. Stay with them, hear them out. That's how you do it. Spend your time with them. Not many adults spend enough time with their kids, you know. And that's the no-no. You really have to, because when you're raising kids, you're raising people who become citizens of the society. You want to see wholesome, good citizens in the society. You want to see your family members to be morally sound. Change yourself.